Most people who start off on a weight loss journey complain about the initial cravings. Why do people get these cravings and how can they realistically handle it?
Understand first that you and bad bacteria, both of you love sugar. Bad gut bacteria will signal to your brain that you're craving things, and then to satisfy those cravings you are going to eat food which is not very nutritious. If you've heard an Instagram video that helps someone drop like 10 kgs and you're so vulnerable, you also want to lose 10 kgs, right? But you immediately try that and maybe it works for you, but what people don't realize that it's not sustainable, because the moment you switch back to your usual regular diet, because this particular diet that you chose to lose weight was unsustainable, gave you great results, maybe you're going to gain all the weight back, or maybe not. I think one mistake that people do when weight loss journey is hyper restriction. I think that is something you need to really stay away from, because firstly causing stress. In your head you're continuously telling yourself, okay, I cannot have this, I cannot have this, I cannot have this, and you want to eat that even more.
Industry or in social media now, I think it's very important to understand that stress.
Honestly, short-term stress is actually...
I know protein helps somebody lose weight, but from a gut microbiome perspective or from a science perspective, what would you like to speak of protein from these aspects?
Protein is the most expensive macronutrient, but at the same time, it's the most...
Please join me in welcoming Simran Nahata, who's a young entrepreneur who's built her company on the basis that better digestion, better microbes, and better habits can absolutely transform the way you feel and function. Simran, we are so happy to have you here today, and I cannot wait to dive deep into the world of gut health, microbes, and everything that you've learned while building your brand Truly Health.
Thank you, Suhasini. I'm very excited to be here.
Simran, you've spoken about how the Indian biology is quite different from the Western biology. And can you break that down to the actual microbiome differences and how they possibly influence the enzyme pathways, the fiber fermentation? What would you have to say about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I say that the biology is different, I don't mean that we're different species, obviously.
Right.
But because our diet is predominantly different, okay? So for example, an Indian diet would compose more of dal, roti, pulses, spices. So the bacterial diversity that we have is higher in bacteria that ferment and digest this, right? So we have a higher population of Prevotella, which is these fiber fermenting bacteria that produce short chain fatty acids. And when you look at Western diets, they're very different from Indian diets.
True.
So when you're forming a supplement or a diet chart which looks at Western diets more than Indian diets, it's not really going to fit. And even our gene pathways, right? Our gene pathways also work towards, sort of digesting our native food, native Indian food, which is a hot dal, more fiber, more spices. So I think when we're talking about how the microbial diversity is different, so that definitely plays a role. And even for like gene pathways, I think everything works towards solving for the Indian diet that we have than the westernized culture that we're moving towards.
Got it. So primarily, your lentils, your spices, all have a direct influence on the microbial diversity in your gut. So the kind of food we eat influences the microbial diversity. And if we move towards a westernized diet, then we're probably changing that diversity, which is going to affect us in different ways.
Absolutely. Inflammation, for one, is a big one. So when we move from an Indian-based diet to Western-based diet, which we already are, right? Like we're swapping home-cooked meals for like a Zomato or an Insta or a Swiggy packaged meal, right? So that difference is already coming about. There's no like running away from it. It's what this fast-paced world and generation is going to do. But I think it's important to be mindful of then having a balance and knowing that you still need diversity in your gut. And your gut bacteria predominantly will solve for Indian foods rather than Western concepts of diet.
It's interesting. So I have a follow-up question. Now, we have a lot of our current Indian population in different parts of the world, right? So sometimes you're going to start to eat more local to what's available over there, and which is what, eventually becomes more sustainable. So how difficult or how long does it take for the gut microbiome diversity to shift, adapt, and do we have do we end up with certain kind of symptoms that we face when that change happens? And what would you have to say to the Indian population that's moving and settling abroad?
Right. I think that's a great question and a very common one at that also. So firstly, there are studies, of course, firstly, it depends on person to person. Everyone's microbiome is completely different.
Individual.
But there are studies which say that it can take anywhere between a few days to a few months or even years. So
Okay.
it honestly depends on what your diet comprises of, right? So there are, in the process of doing that, when you're changing your eating habits from an Indianized diet to a Westernized diet, the process is not going to be smooth because your microbial diversity cannot account for that immediately. And for most people, it happens very abruptly, right?
Okay.
So you will see higher inflammation, you will see more bloating, you will see some form of chronic stress within your gut. And of course, if you keep training that, it will change. So it will, within a couple of weeks, start to change in terms of your microbial diversity. But what these studies also tell me that when this change happens drastically, so if you're, as an Indian diet, we consume more fiber, right?
Right.
Westernized diet, the amount of fiber going in per meal is way lower.
Right.
So you're sort of starving some kind of bacteria in your gut. So the diversity of bacteria will go down.
Got it.
And then you're going to start to have to build a new diversity from scratch, right?
Right.
So it's always advisable that even if you're changing your diet and to make it more sustainable, because you're living in a different country, you want to adapt to that country, there are always options where you can still keep your amount of fiber a constant, amount of protein, fats, oils, carbs, all of that. You can maintain a specific ratio so that the transition becomes simpler for you.
Got it.
So you will be changing your microbial diversity definitely, but to make it easier for you and for your gut, you need to do
Transition.
it. Yeah, you need to transition correctly. You need to transition in balance and then see what's sustainable for you. There are lots of people who, like, even after years of doing it, since their gene pathways don't change, right? You can have new bacterial growth in your gut to support a new diet, but your gene pathways will remain the same. So you
Right.
will feel, when you're eating a higher fiber diet, you will feel better automatically. Your gut will respond to it like that.
Better.
But that doesn't mean that you cannot adapt to a newer diet,
You just
right? Yeah,
balance
you
it
just need to
out.
balance it out.
I think that's great because a lot of times we particularly have people moving abroad and then starting to feel a lot of digestive discomfort, and they're always wondering why. Like the most common thing I get is, people say, I can digest milk in India, but I can't digest milk in the US. I can't digest milk here. So I think this is great information that when you move, you have to transition your food, transition your diet, and not shock your system. So following up with that, a lot of Indians, like I said, move abroad, start to have bloating, feel like they're not digesting lactose anymore, and that, there's a lot of abdominal discomfort. What do you think from a gut microbiome perspective and diversity changes in that one generation? What
Right.
do you think happens?
Right. So I think, of course, our genes don't change, but
Right.
our inputs change. So within a generation, like this generation, for example, like I was saying previously, your home cooked thalis have now changed into processed food. Your ghee has probably changed into like seed oils. You want to adapt with the changing times where everything's way faster, people are much busier. But in the process, I think nutrition does take a hit. So when someone's moving abroad, you're obviously changing your hot home cooked meal for something a little more cold, a little more processed, a little more convenient, right? But combine that with, say, the stress of movement, with, say, a sleep debt, because you're not sleeping as well.
Absolutely.
All these three things together affects your gut in various different levels, right?
True.
And that can lead to inflammation, which is just the starting point. Inflammation in general can then cause bloating, which is a symptom, but the root is still inflammation. So within a generation, it's these habits, it's these inputs that we're putting inside our body that changes. But I mean, it is what it is for people moving abroad, right? So again, I think the key is in balance. The key is to know that even if your lifestyle is transitioning, because you have to get accustomed to a diet, to a new place that you've moved, make sure you're sleeping enough, make sure you're drinking enough water, make sure your stress levels are in check. So because diet will anyway cause an impact on your gut. You can't have these other factors also affecting your gut, which it does, right? It's all
Absolutely.
connected.
Absolutely.
So I think being mindful of that is the first step, and that is something this generation needs to be very cognizant of.
That's such an important point, because I feel like when we shift, we start to adapt quick, but we shock the system.
Yeah.
We don't give that body the time to transition. So that's a very, very important key takeaway, I would say. Moving on, in terms of the relationship between the gut microbiome and our metabolism, what is that relationship and where does Truly Health fit in over here?
Correct. I think it's the most overlooked aspect when people are trying to, say, lose weight and they're talking about metabolism, they're talking about their diet, they're talking about exercise, they're talking about predominantly these two things. But they forget that the biggest piece of the puzzle is their gut health, right? Even if they're eating healthy, there are so many people who come to me and they tell me, we're eating really healthy food, we're going for our morning walks, I'm doing some form of like Zumba or yoga or strength training. I'm still not losing weight. And mostly people think it's a matter of like willpower, or I have thyroid problems, or I have hormonal issues and I'm never going to get over it. But I think understanding that your metabolism is controlled by the good gut bacteria, which directly convert the fiber that you eat into something called short chain fatty acids, which in general controls your insulin sensitivity, your energy production, what your body does to the food that you take in, is very important. So at Truly, we've gone ham about researching about this particular thing in terms of relationship between your metabolism and these good gut bacteria, because the lifestyle that we're living, it's depleting. These SCFAs producing bacteria, their diversity is going down. And when this diversity goes down, you have way more cravings because you have more bad bacteria. And more bad bacteria is directly more craving. And your appetite is going haywire because the connection between the gut and the brain, that is getting obstructed, right? So we're looking into what are these good gut bacteria that directly translate into better metabolism. And that is how we sort of formulate our products. We look at what the Indian diet comprises. We look at what strains directly work on these Indian diet components, what can efficiently break them down and produce these short chain fatty acids that can control your insulin, that can burn more calories effectively, that can make you feel energetic for a longer period of time so that you're more active and can fight your cravings. So this is how we've sort of built Truly Fit to work with your body. We're not focused towards giving someone a fat burner or any chemicals that will just give you very short-term results, and an unhealthy one at that. It's not sustainable. The idea is to make your body work for itself, right?
Absolutely.
So that is basically the entire ethos behind creating Truly Fit for the Indian gut, for the Indian diet.
I think that's where I would personally put it, because it is food, it is your exercise, but both of this, your gut plays an important role. So the Truly Fit can't become like a fat burner. It's going to be a fat burner if your food is right, if your exercise is right, and then it's going to accelerate the process for you to get to the results.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what everybody needs to understand, and that's where I think this future needs to work towards.
Yeah,
Great.
Because there is no silver bullet. Anyone marketing anything as a silver bullet, telling you that you will lose 10 kgs in a month, it's just not true. It doesn't work like that.
At all. Not at all.
Even if you're losing a great number of kgs in 1 month, you're going to gain more than that
2x.
back the next month.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be even more depressed, even more stressed. And
even more craving.
More cravings. Cortisol will go up. I mean, the cycle is very vicious. So you need to look for sustainable solutions.
Absolutely.
You need to look at the science, read a little more to understand what truly works for your body.
So Simran, many Indians today work in a very high stress environment, live in a high stress environment. They have this high functioning anxiety and an absolutely high emotional overload. Which gut-brain pathway is impacted, or which are the hormones that get impacted first, and what would your input be on this?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's very pertinent, at least in today's day. So whenever someone says that they're stressed, it directly translates to their gut being stressed, okay? Their gut, there's some form of inflammation that's going around the gut, which does get affected. In terms of hormonal pathways, cortisol is the hero stress hormone here. And the problem with cortisol is, so our brains have not evolved as much from the caveman brain, okay? So when they were stressed, for example, they were stressed because there was a shortage of food, or they had to have a fight or flight response.
Correct.
In general, right? So whenever cortisol was released, in general, more food was stored in their body because they could probably need it in the future, right? But because there might be an attack or there might be food scarcity. Today's day and age, there is no such thing. We are very well fed and there is no fight or flight response that is particularly required. But when cortisol is released, your body will store extra food. And that usually is seen as visceral fat. So people's cortisol levels have become higher and consistently higher. And they stay high. and they're not coming down very often because people are not engaging in as many stress busting activities. So your cortisol levels are high. So as a result of which you are going to accumulate more fat, right? And it specifically happens around your areas, mostly around the waist, which is a very common Indian body type, which is the skinny fat, right? Their arms and legs are relatively thinner and they have a wider waist.
Right.
So cortisol is definitely something that gets affected. The second I would say is serotonin, which is your feel-good, happy hormone. 90 to 95% of serotonin is actually produced in the gut.
Absolutely.
And most people think it's the brain, but it's actually the gut. So when your gut is inflamed, the amount of serotonin you're producing is lower. So you're less happy, as a result of which you want more adrenaline and dopamine. So then you have high sugar foods. And, you've seen people when they're like going through a breakup, they'll grab a tub of ice cream and they'll keep eating that, right? It's because your brain actively wants to feel better. It wants to get the immediate, instant gratification of dopamine. So then you'll crave higher sugary, fatty foods. And the amount of serotonin will not get better then, because sugar is what feeds the bad bacteria. So you will have even more cravings and even more cravings after that. So the loop just becomes very vicious. And the third thing is microbial diversity gets impacted. So your metabolites, that is also the SCFAs that we've been talking about so much, which directly control your hunger, your energy, your insulin sensitivity, all of that also then takes a hit. So you definitely have insulin issues. You definitely, it's a cycle, like it's a domino effect. Like one thing can lead to another, to another, to another, and it can get as serious as it can be. So you really need to stop, wait, think, change the stress responses in your brain, and then move forward, because it has some really long-term effects.
Right. No, that's very true, because as much as cortisol gets the bad rep, I think that cortisol was the one that helped our ancestors survive.
Definitely.
Right? It gave you the glucose you needed when you had to fight or when you had to survive without food. And what we definitely experience in a high stress environment today is how your cortisol spikes up. There's more glucose in the blood, then the insulin comes in. The insulin's trying to store. So, you're storing more fat. And over the period of time, this is what leads to insulin resistance, right?
Yes.
So I truly believe that, I call it the internal hotline between the brain and the gut, and the gut and the brain, because, you're constantly in touch. And if you're overly using that hotline, then something's getting affected a little too much. And while these words of cortisol, which has become this demon suddenly, and you've got insulin resistance that gotten such a big importance in the industry or in social media now, I think it's very important to understand that stress and underlying stress, or just stressing about this, is going to release more cortisol, is going to release more insulin, is going to just keep this rolling up.
That's the problem, because honestly, short-term stress is actually good for your body.
Absolutely.
You need cortisol to function better, to activate certain pathways in your brain that makes you more efficient at a task, right? And like I said, it's been going on for generations for us. It's the maintenance of cortisol at a high level consistently that then causes adverse effects in your body. So short-term cortisol is actually good. It has gotten a really bad rep, but that's only because people, the cortisol levels don't come down. They just stay high.
Skyrocketing with time.
Completely.
Absolutely. And that's where the inflammation goes higher and higher, and all the autoimmune, the chronic inflammation. And I think when you spoke of serotonin, I would say the same thing, because what happens is a lot of times people start to they start to love workouts. Now, your exercise, low intensity, moderate intensity, increases serotonin. Now, people love that, but sometimes take it up a notch, way too higher. Now, to inform and to educate that high intensity workout actually will start bringing in more inflammation. So you need to balance that out. So many times people come in with such high intensity workout, eat okay, I wouldn't say bad, but they come with the thing of, I'm not losing weight anymore. And that's where to help them to say, you have to pace down on your workout. You have to, help your gut work with your workouts to help you with weight loss. And which is where, when you spoke of, the truly fit, I think that combination becomes so important, because you can work out, but you also work with the good gut microbiome, and let that journey help you with your goals.
Absolutely. And I've usually seen this with women who suffer from PCOS, PCOD, where they're engaged in like very high cortisol, high intensity interval trainings. And I'm just like, you need to experiment with enough kind of exercises to know what works for you. Because I've had case studies where women have shifted. I mean, strength training is extremely important, don't get me wrong, but your HIIT workouts, when they've shifted from doing that thrice a week to then incorporating a little more yoga, a little more balanced workouts, they've just felt better.
Absolutely. I remember once I met somebody after a conference, and then she was telling me about how I'm not losing weight. I work out so much. And I just told her to probably revisit the kind of workout she's doing, because from the little bit she told me about her food, there was nothing wrong. But she was not seeing any results. And all that she actually needed to do was to pace her activity out rather than go all out. And yeah, I think the gut microbiome plays such an important role in what I would say is in controlling which direction you're going to sway towards. And it's so important to understand it and then work in line with that. So Simran, emotional hunger versus real hunger. How do you think the emotions reshape what hunger or satiety looks like?
Definitely. So I think real hunger is your body asking for food. Emotional hunger is your brain asking for food, right?
Right, absolutely.
So there are two hormones that I think everyone should know about. The main hormone for appetite is called ghrelin. It basically tells your body ki I'm hungry now, ab bhook laga hai.
Right.
And then there is another hormone called leptin, which basically dictates how satiated you feel, right? So I will have a lot of people who'll come to me and they'll tell me that we ate, and then just after an hour, I'm hungry again.
Right.
So people don't feel full, they don't feel satiated, and their connection with the brain that tells the brain that, okay, now I'm actually hungry, that gets messed up. So all of these, like GLP-1s also, for example,
Right.
it focuses on the body's ability to want food. So people just don't feel hungry, and that's why they eat less, and that's why they end up losing weight.
Right.
So it's honestly a matter of these two main hormones that play a role. When you're stressed, or when you're not sleeping well, or when the food you eat is not of great quality, the connection between these hormones and the brain breaks, right?
Right.
So you're feeling hungry at odd hours, and even if you're eating, you're just never full. So you end up overeating. So I think one of the most common things that's happening in India, which is on the basis of studies that Swiggy and Zepto and all of these have released, is that people have now started midnight snacking a lot.
Right.
So it directly shows you that if you're not sleeping on time, your ghrelin and leptin levels get messed up. You have more ghrelin, so more appetite, and less leptin, which means less satisfaction after eating. So midnight snacking then becomes a predominant thing of this generation. And of course, if you're eating at midnight when you should be sleeping, you're making your body work, you're making your body digest food when it needs rest and peace. Of course you're going to feel bloated. Of course you're going to put on weight. Of course you will want more, and your appetite is not going to work with your body. You're not eating to then sustain yourself. You're eating to get a dopamine hit then.
Satisfy your hormones.
Honestly, yeah. So it's just that.
Yes, and I think it again becomes a vicious cycle there, because what happens is once you start feeding yourself that post-dinner midnight food, you're starting to release that hormone, and then over a period of time you're beginning to affect your melatonin synthesis.
Yes.
And then you're no longer feeling sleepy at a time that earlier you were feeling sleepy just because you started snacking, right? So, and then you start saying I have sleep issues and I have hunger issues in the middle of the night. And I think it just starts with 3-4 days or maybe 2 weeks of doing it, and then your whole cycle changes. But I often tell people that it's 2 weeks of something that changed it, but it also just will take you 2 weeks of just being disciplined, and then you can see the magic change again. So
but
yes,
that's the difficult part, right? And people think it's all about like willpower and this and that. It really is about understanding what you need to change, because people will be like, oh, my lifestyle is still the same, why am I not sleeping well, why is the quality of my sleep deteriorating, right? But they're not understanding that these are the small points that like accumulate and they snowball into something so much bigger. And then they'll start taking sleep supplements, and then they'll get used to the sleep supplements, and then another vicious cycle will set forth.
Absolutely. That's I think that's what the current generation ends up struggling with. Speaking of this generation, the current generation, I think, is the inflamed generation, or we speak so much about inflammation. Do you think the emotional stress parenting style, and the academic stress has contributed to this?
100%, because we have innumerable studies that show that the amount of stress you've had as a child directly determines your microbial diversity, right? So
Interesting.
stress, of course, immediately causes inflammation. Inflammation will kill some good gut bacteria, which will lower the diversity. And there are so many instances of early onset of diabetes, early onset of PCOD, PCOS. All of these sort of lifestyle disorders set in way earlier just because of the way you've lived your life in your preteens and teens. So I think being cognizant of that, is definitely very, very important. And also with this generation, I think there are way more inputs which can cause stress, okay? Take social media, for example. You're not just comparing yourself with like the people around you, but you're comparing yourself with, say, 300 million users of a platform like
Absolutely.
Instagram, right?
Right.
You're always comparing yourself. You're always stressed that you're not doing as much as you should be, or someone's always doing something better, someone's happier, someone's more successful. All of these small trigger points immediately affect your stress levels, and that directly affects your gut, because your gut and your brain are completely related, right?
Right.
Whatever you feel in your brain then gets sent and transmitted to your gut, and vice versa. So I think the inputs is too many in number. I think people, it's very easy to ignore them because you're
Yes.
feeling good while you're in a social media app, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
The dopamine hit is
It's-
real.
yes.
But you don't understand that these micro stressors then accumulate, and it causes an inflammation in various different ways, right? It could be a skin issue with
Absolutely.
toxins getting deposited under your skin because your gut barrier is not as strong, because your gut is inflamed. So I think that yes, this generation is more inflamed, but I do think that it's not irreversible.
No, in fact, I think it's very important to tell the audience at this point that we're not saying stress is a bad thing, right? Stress helps you survive. Stress teaches you a lot of things. But it's this chronic stress, like these micro stresses that just keep building. So it's a chronic building up or built up stress, which then goes and impacts your gut microbiome, which then leads to that inflammation. We are not saying that every time you dial stress, there's inflammation that gets, a call in your gut. No, it's about the chronic stress that keeps building up and then leads to the inflammation. And we're talking about what triggers the stress. Why are we so easily triggered? So definitely the times we live in, I think, are different, and I'm sure every generation had their
Yeah.
bit of it, but it's about how we learn to handle it, how we learn to cope with it, how we learn to make sure it doesn't get to a stage where we are constantly thinking about it, where our mind is just constantly on a high note,
Yeah.
right? Okay, that I think is a very important message, that stress isn't a bad thing, but are you chronically stressed? Are you, without understanding, building that stress up, and is that the reason why you're inflamed? So, Simran, most people who start off on a weight loss journey complain about the initial cravings. Can you shed some light on why do people get these cravings and how can they realistically handle it?
Definitely. So understand first that that you and bad bacteria, both of you love sugar, all right? Both of you love high fatty, high sugar, a little bit processed food, and that is where the problem starts, because it's a self-fulfilling cycle, like with most things that we've spoken about. Bad gut bacteria will signal to your brain that you're craving things, and then to satisfy those cravings you are going to eat food which is not very nutritious, and then the growth of bad bacteria is going to increase at the cost of the good gut bacteria, right? So you're going to keep craving then.
Right.
I think one mistake that people do when they're on their weight loss journey is hyper restriction. I think that is something you need to really stay away from, because then you're firstly causing stress, and then in your head you're continuously telling yourself, okay, I cannot have this, I cannot have this, I cannot have this, and you want to eat that even more.
Correct.
And whenever you have a cheat day, because if you do at all, because you've continuously told yourself, on cheat days I've seen people go all out.
Absolutely.
They will overeat, and then they will redo all the good work that they've done in the previous few weeks, right? So I think the key, of course, over here, as most people have said, is moderation. But it is also to understand what is working for you. If intermittent fasting is not working for you, just because some Instagram guru has said that you need to intermittently fast, you don't have to do that. It will not work for you. So how people should do it, I think, is in a very balanced way. One thing that I really believe is that the order in which you eat your food, of course, matters a lot, right?
Yes.
So even if you want to eat something sweet, of course, don't front load that.
Yes.
You need to first line your gut with protein and good fats.
Right.
Then you put in your carbs. And then if need be, then you do a little bit of sugar. And I know when I say little bit of sugar, people can probably take it to mean anything.
Yes.
So we'll probably have to include a disclaimer.
Yes.
But the idea is, we've seen with research, is that the order in which you eat the food can reduce your insulin spike by up to 70%, right?
Absolutely.
And this way, you're not eating from a place of, oh, I want to kill my appetite with sugar. I just want to end with sugar a little bit. So the quantity of sugar that you end up eating is also going drastically
Limited.
down.
Absolutely.
Right? So how you do it matters a lot. And I also think that at least with vegetarians, I'm a vegetarian, I think, and I was suffering from a lot of cravings. After every meal, I had to end it with something sweet. So one thing that helped me get over that is protein.
Right.
I was under the notion that, okay, dal is enough protein or eating paneer is enough protein. It just wasn't. So when I started including more protein at the beginning of my meal, I immediately thought my cravings just dropped. Like, it didn't go away overnight, and I don't think it works like that.
Yeah.
But maybe like once a day, not after breakfast, lunch and dinner, but after, say, my lunch, I will probably eat something sweet. But the amount of cravings just completely goes down if you have more protein. Again, because of all the different factors, the non-instant release of blood sugar into your blood, right? So I think this gets affected very much. And with Truly Fit, this is what we've tried to do. How we control cravings is we basically introduce good gut bacteria that should have been in your gut, is not, because lifestyle has lowered the diversity, but they're very important in killing the bad bacteria that causes these cravings, these 4 p.m. hunger cravings that you have, or these midnight cravings that you have. That shouldn't happen. That is not normal, and giving into it will only exacerbate this cycle, right? So you need to put a stop to that, and that is a very, very important part in your weight loss journey.
No, I completely, in fact, have to agree. That point that you made, that, on having protein before your meal has helped you not go and have that craving after. And I think that's so important. Protein, fat, it works differently for different people. And the first and the foremost thing is, when you do that, the first change you see is you're no longer sleepy after lunch.
Yes.
You've eaten in the right way. Now, I do know that it doesn't mean we start with eating a bowl of dal, but you plan out your meal in such a way that it still feels like you're eating a good plate of food.
Yes.
But you start to relate your food to help you optimize, and not for you to say, okay, I've eaten my lunch, now I'm feeling a 2 p.m. slump, I'm feeling a 4 p.m. hunger. And that's a very important point that you've said. In fact, what I would want everybody to take away from here is, how do you realistically handle these cravings, is by planning the sequence of your meals and by seeing how you can eat in the right order, or in probably handling these cravings by putting them at the end of a meal rather than eating a snack which is fully sweet. Like, when people say, oh, it's Diwali, I want to have sweets, I always say, be it Diwali, be it Janmashtami, be it Christmas, you can enjoy your sweet, but just time it right. Don't make that sweet a 4 p.m. hunger meal, Instead, probably after your lunch, eat a piece of anything you want, and you will see that it satisfies you, and at the same time you feel no guilt, or you don't feel like, oh no, I'm overdoing this, I'm overeating, or any such.
You control your cravings. Don't let the cravings control you, right?
Absolutely.
So once you've started your meal well, firstly, you're not operating from a place of hunger, you're only operating from a place of satisfaction, and maybe a couple of bites will give you satisfaction. But when you start with hunger, you'll probably end up eating so much more, and then you're just controlled by your cravings.
Absolutely. So speaking of protein, Simran, now I know protein helps somebody lose weight, but from a gut microbiome perspective, or from a science perspective, how would you say protein influences satiety, thermogenesis, muscle preservation? What would you like to speak of protein from these aspects?
Definitely. So I think protein is the most expensive macronutrient, but at the same time, it's the most filling.
Right.
Right. So, and we have numerous studies to show show protein's role in thermogenesis, which is the amount of calories that your body burns while it's digesting food. So, more protein, more the number of calories required, because as I said, it's very expensive. Your body needs more calories to then burn that, right? So it needs more energy for that. So of course it makes you feel fuller. It makes you the number of calories you burn processing it efficiently is higher. And the problem that I see with this in today's day is that, not just today's day, but when people are trying to lose weight and they're doing it without consuming enough protein, they're losing muscle, which is very problematic, because what happens is you're not going to feel satiated, you're not going to feel satisfied. So once you're done with the diet, you are going to want to eat more, and that's why people yo-yo, right? They keep going back and forth. They put on weight and then they lose weight and they put on weight again, because it's just not sustainable.
Right.
And especially as women, you need your muscle mass.
Absolutely.
Because that's the sink where you burn calories, where with more muscle mass, your metabolism is going to improve. The amount of calories you're burning is going to improve at your resting stage. And that is what leads to real weight loss. You know, people think real weight loss is doing cardio in the gym or doing strength training. That's not directly leading to weight loss. What it is you're building muscle. Your muscle then, at your basal metabolic rate, it then it's making your body consume more calories to digest the protein, and that can only happen if you have enough muscle mass.
Right.
So I think that is a link that people typically miss, because even with like Ozempic and things, right? Like I do think whichever weight loss diet you're on, if you're on a diet, you need to ensure that your muscles remain intact, that you're consuming the right amount of protein, you're not overdoing or underdoing carbs, so that it is sustainable for you. Without doing protein, it cannot be sustainable. Your skin will start sagging. You're going to look way older. Like I've been seeing case studies of people who've been doing calorie restriction, which is an efficient way to lose weight for sure, but they're doing it without protein.
Right.
And protein's required for skin health, hair health, muscle health, cardiovascular health. So if you're doing it without this very important macronutrient, you're doing your body a great amount of disservice. So I really think you need to like stay away. So while we were designing Truly Pro, which is our vegan plant protein, we specifically looked into this amino acid structure, this profile, to ensure that while we keep all our sources plant, we ensure that our consumers get the entire essential amino acids. And we've also included this one particular ingredient called L-carnitine, which directly translates fat into energy. So it makes your body, while ensuring your body gets enough protein, it also ensures that you're getting a little extra metabolic boost while you're on your weight loss journey, because protein is a non-negotiable for weight loss. So Suhasini, I've had a lot of people ask me a bunch of questions about different diets without truly understanding what works for them, right? And since you work with clients day in and day out, what is your opinion on the various different kinds of diets? Some have gone quite viral, some are not sustainable, while others are actually giving people great results. So what do you think, in your opinion, is the right way to choose a diet, if at all?
I truly believe that no one diet fits all. I mean, it's like how I said recently, it's like a fashion trend, right? Like a certain dress can look fantastic on somebody, but you put it on and you look horrendous in it, right? So a certain diet, so a diet can't quite fit you, even though it looks perfectly amazing on somebody else. So the same way I would say with, be it keto, be it low carb diet, be it a high protein diet. Yes, all of these are important nutrients, but you can't just take them and highlight only one and follow it through. You need to figure out what works best for you. Now, take keto. Like we were talking about the entire thermogenesis. So obviously, a gram of fat burns more calories, but now that doesn't mean that you go on a keto diet and you will lose a lot of weight. You will. It will happen, but it will not last. And you will have that high fat affect you in different ways. So you have to kind of figure out which is the macro balance that works for you. Yes, there are genetic pathways that can actually tell you what is the macro pathways that will work best for you. But you need to understand that you need a high protein. You need good fats. You need carbs. You can't do zero carb for a long sustainable way. And you need fiber, right? if you ask me, there are not 3 macronutrients, but there are 4 macronutrients. You've got the carbs, you've got the protein, you've got the fats, but you've got the fiber. That's also a macro, right? Now, you need to figure out in which combination this works for you. And it is not like I go to a nutritionist, she will tell me what it is and it's going to work for me. No, you kind of keep working and figuring out what works best. For a few people, a certain percentage of fat is better. For a few people, a certain percentage of protein is better. And you'd be surprised that for a lot of us, carbs aren't the villain. It's about using that carb in the right proportion along with everything else that actually works really well for you. Because for a lot of people, when they do a very high protein diet, their ammonia levels also start increasing in the gut, right? Now, if I don't eat some amount of grains and some amount of carbs, or however I bring my carbs and grains, fruits, etc., that ammonia is going to keep building up. That's going to start causing other issues in my gut. So you're on a high protein diet, but you can't be on a zero carb diet. You have to balance that out. And that's where it has to get personalized with gut, with genetics, and with what works for you and how you keep shifting that across. And this is not one time. Like, you need to keep revisiting it time to time when you feel like for a prolonged period of time, I'm facing an issue and that's not getting resolved, even though I'm not doing anything wrong, then you need to go back and revisit it. So, I mean, unfortunately, no one diet fits all. You've got to figure out which designer works for you at which occasion and work with it.
Absolutely. I just don't think people are putting in enough time to figuring it out. Like we touched upon this earlier. If you've heard an Instagram video that helps someone drop like 10 kgs and you're so vulnerable, you also want to lose 10 kgs, right? But you immediately try that and maybe it works for you, but what people don't realize that it's not sustainable, right?
Right.
If you're doing something forcefully to get like really short-term results, you don't understand that you've lowered your body's BMI because you're, say, for example, consuming very less number of calories and you're just overdoing a particular macro. So in the short term, it's helped you lose weight. But you are going to go back to your usual cycles, your normal diet. And when that happens and your metabolism is lower, you're going to end up gaining so much weight.
Absolutely.
So people need to, I think, invest time, understand what kind of diet, if at all, they can sustain for a longer duration. Because the moment you switch back to your usual regular diet, because this particular diet that you chose to lose weight was unsustainable, gave you great results maybe, but unsustainable, you're going to get and gain all the weight back or maybe more. So I think that is important.
I think what I believe is that people need to work on people need to look at food as fuel.
Yes.
You can't say I'm on, like, I really don't think anybody can be on a diet and be off a diet, right? You can go on a specific diet if you've got a specific goal coming up, which means you're doing certain things a little differently. But you're falling back into something that's overall going to keep you optimally nourished, optimally productive, and going to keep you in good health, right? So you have to figure out what's your capacity that helps you sustain and keeps you in good health. Different seasons can call for different goals where you can get more specific, but there's never going to be this is it, this is final, right? It keeps changing.
100%.
Simran, so we were talking about chronic emotional stress. Now, say somebody is going through, or people are having chronic emotional stress, but they're also looking to tackle it with a probiotic and they're taking in a probiotic. Can the chronic emotional stress cancel out the gut healing because of this constant stress that's underlying?
Right. So while I don't think it can cancel it out, I think what chronic stress predominantly does is that it affects your gut barrier, right? The lining, it affects the gut barrier lining. And when you introduce probiotics, this particular lining is what it strengthens, When we select our probiotic strains, like for Truly Complete, for example, one of the strains that we have selected typically helps with increasing the integrity of this gut barrier lining so that toxins don't seep out. When toxins seep out, so a lot of people who are stressed will see like inflammation on their bodies, right? Like that's one of the first ways stress shows up. So I think the battleground changes when you're stressed, but the effectiveness of the probiotic strain in itself doesn't change. It might take longer
Okay.
because stress will cause dysbiosis, more and more
Right.
dysbiosis. So if you were calmer, if you weren't going through a period of stress, say it would take X number of days for it to have shown positive results explicitly.
Right.
Because the battleground now looks a little different, because there are more soldiers from the opposing party that you have to fight, it is going to take a little longer. So you'll have to continue the dosage for a longer period of time. But from an efficacy perspective, the strain is going to do its work. You need to support your mental game to work along with the probiotics rather than work against it.
So you basically get the mental game to add in those extra soldiers on your side
Yes.
along with the probiotic to help
Exactly.
fight it out better.
Exactly.
So speaking about adding probiotics, so if there are two people, right, given the same probiotic strain, but they have very different microbiome histories, how drastically can the effect of it change?
Right. So it depends on how drastically different, say, for example, their diets have been. So one strain that works for someone who's been, say, born and brought up in the States will not work for us as Indians, right? Because our lifestyle, soil, gene pathways, everything is very, very different.
Right.
So there will be a drastic difference in how it affects people when the diet different is this drastic. So a lot of people will in general say, oh, probiotics are a scam. But that is because the products that they've tried are actually formulated on the basis of Western research. It's not probiotics that have been formulated given the Indian lifestyle in mind, given the Indian diet, Indian soil, and all of these Indian parameters in mind, right? So you need to look at what strains are native to your gut. And when you introduce more of it, it will help you digest your native food. So from a country to country perspective, from a diet to diet perspective, I do think that it drastically differs. A Western formulated product is not going to predominantly be very effective. It's not going to colonize. We're just going to poop it out. But within the same country as well, of course, it does affect from people to people. So one of the best favorite questions that I get is for Truly Fit, which is the weight management probiotic. People asking me how long until I see results, right? And then I need to explain to them that everyone's metabolism is different, everyone's gut microbiome is different, your age is different, right?
Absolutely.
So something that takes 2 to 3 weeks to work for me might take 2 to 3 months to work for you.
Right.
So it is going to work, but it's going to take a longer duration. So I don't think the efficacy of the product will differentiate as much.
Change much.
But yeah, you need to look at which strains cater to your microbiome, and you need to use those strains to your own benefit.
Got it. So you can use, so two people taking the same probiotic can have different responses,
Yeah.
but you need to wait, watch, figure out, add and delete to get that equation set for you.
Definitely. And even
Got it.
stress, right? Like someone who's more stressed will definitely take longer if they're trying to achieve, say, mental clarity or mental stress relief.
Right.
Because you're more stressed, because the dysbiosis is greater in your case. So you are going to require longer for more sustainable results as opposed to someone who's not coming from the same place.
Right.
So I think it depends from person to person for sure.
You know, Simran, I find that kids abroad suddenly start to reject the foods that they otherwise love in India, other than the influence of the people around. What do you think is happening from a sensory sensitivity and a microbial adaptation in their new environment?
Right. So this is again very, very relevant because there are lots of parents who are continuously worried about this when their kid sort of like moves abroad or when they have to move abroad. So a lot of microbial diversity is determined by your early exposure, right? And when I say early exposure, I mean as early as how you were born. So say from a vaginal birth, for example, that's the first time that you're exposed to your mother's microbiome.
Yes.
And that is your first source of bacteria and other microorganisms as well. So that exposure combined with then the microbiome that you get from your mother's breast milk to the early food habits and textures that you are exposed to during your early life. So a child liking sambar chutney, for example, when such a child moves abroad, there are different factors that come into play. Firstly is the shock that you spoke about earlier. And also understand that a child or a kid's microbiome is very actively still getting built up, right?
True.
So it's used to a certain thing and it's been used to that for a duration, and then you immediately shock that. And this is true for both kids and adults, right? When you shock it immediately, there is going to be some sort of inflammation. Secondly, what I think is when a child is moved abroad, there is some sort of isolation that kicks in first. So there is also the angle of stress, emotional stress, yes, because it's not just a different city where you'll find other Indians, but it's a completely different country that you need to make peace with. So that emotional isolation then causes the child to make certain decisions. So if the child is seeing all their other friends eat, say, pizza or pasta, even if they liked sambar rice, they will probably now want to eat pizza and pasta because they want to fit in.
Yeah, the environment makes such a big influence.
Absolutely. So they'd want to fit in, and that again then hampers the diversity. And if that diversity gets hampered, then of course you'll see that manifested in the form of bloating, in the form of other forms of inflammation as well. Like adults also go through, like, say, hair fall or inflammation, or they can't sleep well. All of that are symptoms that arise from the same source, which is your gut and brain dealing with the movement in different ways, from a food perspective, as well as your environment perspective. So it's the combination of the two that becomes problematic.
Got it. So what's important is to not shock the system. I think that's the most important.
Yeah, I think that's coming out as a theme.
So Simran, from your experience, what's that one misconception about Indian health that is scientifically incorrect but yet just refuses to die?
Quite a few.
Okay.
But honestly, what I think is most problematic is that people think that, because a lot of our breakfast options are very high carb, and because mithai is such a big part of our culture, people think that, oh, we're just used to handling and digesting this. We're built for it. Like, we're built for high carbs and high sugar, which is not true at all, because there are so many studies that show that South Asians are very susceptible to central obesity and diabetes, even if the scale doesn't show that your weight is problematic. So people will think that, okay, I'm just like 55 or 60 kgs, my weight is fine, so I can consume more carbs or more sugar just because the weighing scale shows that your weight is fine. Weight in itself doesn't tell you a lot about the picture. A lot of people with PCOD are not overweight.
Right, absolutely. They're lean PCOD.
Yeah, lean PCOD is also a thing. Even with diabetes, even if you can be pre-diabetic, and it doesn't always have to be that the weight is going to be the indication that something's going to happen, or something's going to, or it marks the onset of something, right? So I think people are very misled by the concept that if I'm within a healthy weight range, I can do anything and anything goes. I can eat as many sugary foods as I want. I can have more processed food just because my weight is okay. So I think people are very obsessed with weight. At the same time, if people are slightly overweight, they start to panic a lot and not understanding that there are so many different markers that you need to look at. So I think this is a very, very big misconception, and people have just that one metric, and I think India is very heavily reliant on that metric. So there was one very interesting study that showed someone at 55 as an Indian, if you're eating more carbs and more sugar, you might be at a higher susceptibility to actually getting diabetes or obesity than a Western counterpart.
Right.
Even though we keep hearing that, oh, Western countries, everyone is obese, like a large population is obese. But this infatuation with like weight being the marker and then allowing yourself to overdo things, I think that is very Indian at its core.
That's true, because it takes a lot of time for me to tell people, okay, weight is a number. You can actually be above what is a normal BMI, but you could be healthier, right? Weight is a number you need to be aware of. It is more of a direction in which you need to move, but it cannot become your destination.
Yes.
And it cannot determine whether you're healthy or unhealthy just because your weight falls in the right bracket. And I think, speaking of South Asians, I also believe that South Asians we have been more carb-centric just because of how our ancestors have had to fight for things and everything, right? But I also believe that if you are balancing that out with good amount of activity, if you walk that stretch, if you do things, add in the fiber that an Asian diet asks you to add, you can actually nullify it in your own way.
Yes.
What you need to do is to figure out how you're balancing it. And like you rightly said, weight cannot be the only thing that governs this whole thing. It's about what is health and what your blood tests have to say, what your genetic predispositions have to say. There's so much more to it. In all the things that you've explored, I'm sure you started truly with the area of the different gut healing tools and the gut healing products that are available in the market. What was your thought, or what was your reason, scientifically or philosophically, for you to start off with Truly, and how is it catered to, or how is it different?
Right. So, Truly was conceived out of a very, very personal problem. I was someone who was facing recurring gut issues. I was diagnosed with PCOD at the age of 18, and I was also overweight. And I'm a very curious person in general, so I like trying a lot of different products in the market. And given that I am a microbiologist, I always turn the pack, look at ingredients, will probably nerd out when it comes to research on those ingredients to see, okay, what clinical studies have been done, what the results look like. And in general, I found out 3 white spaces in the Indian market. First, like we've been covering, formulations did not look at Indian guts. They looked at Western guts. They didn't identify that there is a difference in gene pathways in the microbial diversity that we have and the kind of food that we're eating. So we really want a formulation that is Indian in origin. Secondly, when it comes to products in the Indian market, there is a one-size-fits-all approach, which in probiotics just doesn't work.
Right.
There are certain strains of bacteria that perform certain functions, and if that is the goal that you have, you need to employ those strains. So this is why I was facing recurring issues, simply because I was facing a lot of bloating. Now, bloating is a symptom, right? The root cause can be gut inflammation, constipation, or food intolerances. Just looking at bloating will not prevent its recurrence unless you look at the root cause.
Root cause, absolutely.
So I didn't see companies looking at the root cause. They were probably throwing in like 40 or 60 billion CFU, but of which strains? Strains that are cheap, strains that are common, strains that I already have, and strains that will not make a difference.
Right.
But from a marketing perspective, 40, 60 billion CFU sounds good, right?
Yes.
And for someone who doesn't know what CFU even stands for, it's very easy to market to
Correct.
them. So I did think that the Indian population was also being misled simply because they are coming from a position of lack of information, right?
So the more the better.
Yeah, which doesn't work. You need the right strains and in the right concentration.
Right.
Everything else is just noise.
Right.
And the third problem was that the format in which they were being sold. So I think India, of course, has a stigma around capsules where they think it's a medicine. But probiotics are good bacteria that need the outer covering of the capsule to protect them from being killed by your stomach acid. So that they reach the colon where they're actually supposed to work. But there were a lot of products in the market that were in powder form, in liquid forms, in gummy forms, loaded with sugar, which as a health product is so counterproductive.
Yes.
So from a formulation and format perspective, I thought that people just weren't delivering.
Right.
And gut is such an important part and piece of our life. 7 out of 10 Indians are suffering from some form of gut issue. And I was suffering from it. People around me were suffering from it, my friends and family. So the idea was not really to launch into the market because I was a microbiologist and I understood the gut microbiome because that's where my research was. I did think that I can truly create products that can make an impact for me, firstly, because gut issues are a very big buzzkill. Come on. Like day in, day out, you don't want to be thinking about your gut. You don't want to be thinking about this. So many other things to think about. So there were these 3 white spaces that I thought I could solve for. And I was able to, of course, reverse a few of my PCOD symptoms. I was able to lose 15 kgs, of course, during a longer duration of time. But I did think that these products really held promise and they could help people because they solved for these white spaces. And that's how Truly was born.
Very, very interesting. And I think what this actually gives us as an area to work upon as a country and as the health experts, qualified health experts, is to actually have more research in the field for the Indian population, right? I think having that research is going to help people make products that are going to be more made in India and at the same time for the Indian population that's living here, eating this kind of food and facing these problems,
Absolutely.
right? You're very right in the sense that, people have gut issues that they're constantly dealing with. But a lot of times it's just one small thing that can correct it and it doesn't have to go on to something so chronic, leading to, you doing colonoscopies, figuring out what are the issues you're having or leading to ulcerative colitis and etc. And I think it's so important to just pay attention. Listen to your body. It is always saying something. Listen to your body. Don't fight your body. I always tell people, you're never in a journey against your body. It's not that, oh, my body is not losing weight. It's you who's not losing weight. Your body is communicating something. Your body is you. You're not against. You're not two people fighting a war, You've got to understand. And in that, your gut is such an integral part. I often, in fact, even give this example that we live in a world of microbes.
Yes.
Right? The gut is a city on its own. We are a
Completely.
host where, the gut is kind of doing a lot of things and the microbes are doing a lot of things. So we live in a world of microbes and we have to align and work in sync. And you can't
Absolutely.
go fighting against it or suddenly loading it up with people and then suddenly, absolutely starving it of things. So it's very important, and it's very interesting to know that we actually had this gap. We had this gap, and that, yes, you're very right. People have this thing against supplements, but I say supplement has to be a tool to enhance what you're eating,
Yeah.
but it isn't completely bad if it's going to help you. It's
Yeah.
just about figuring out what you need and when you need. Because you've got some people who are anti-supplements, and then you've got some people who have more supplements in their shelf, and then they're just having everything, and now they want you to use it all.
Yeah.
But I don't need all of that,
Not
right?
at all.
You need to figure where and how to balance it out.
I think everyone needs a food first approach. Anything that can be solved with food, like even with my customers, I do ask them how many supplements you're taking, why are you taking these supplements, can it not be solved by food? A lot of the times it is true because of the degradation in food quality now.
Yeah,
Milk, for example.
You can't ignore the degradation in the soil. You can't ignore the degradation, hence, in the quality of food.
Dairy, antibiotics in
Absolutely.
cows.
Supply versus demand, right? Like, take a Nagpur orange. Like I always say, it's in season right now, but take that. What probably I had 20 years ago tasted and was so different was this something now. Take a papaya. The number of seeds inside the papaya have just suddenly vanished, right? So you need to understand that we are genetically modifying for the supply demand.
Yes.
At the same time, your body has to also adapt to that, and you've got to work in sync.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because I don't think people realize that 90% of your body is actually microbes.
Absolutely.
You are more bacteria than you are human. And that should be a humbling sentence. That should tell you what you should be feeding your body and how you should be thinking about things, because you are more bacteria. And these bacteria not just control your digestion, which people usually associate with gut health. You tell them gut health, they'll say digestion. But everything from like metabolic diseases to autoimmune diseases to mental health diseases and also digestion diseases, the entire spectrum is controlled by your gut, which contain these microorganisms. So people need to start thinking about this differently. They need to start thinking about this from first principles to understand how they can train their microbes to truly feel their best every day. Right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's a gut brain axis, there's a gut skin axis, there's a gut hormone axis, there's a gut which makes 70% of your immune cells.
System, yes.
So, and you've got that gut which honestly you have to feed.
Yeah.
I think you've got to feed that gut for you to be in your optimal best. So if that gut is happy, you're going to be happy on top of the world. And if I think your gut, you kind of feed it all the wrong things, and you're going to eventually see that in your skin, in your thoughts, in
everything.
every
And
possible
when
way.
you're having a high fiber meal, for example, you do feel good after.
Yes.
Like people have seen it when they eat a nice healthy meal, a very balanced meal, their moods is going to get
Improve.
elevated because your gut is feeling happy. You will automatically feel happy. Like there is no two ways about it. So I
absolutely.
genuinely think that people need to take it more seriously, and they are, honestly.
So on that note, do you think India will move from a diet culture to a gut first, an emotional healing first approach? Are there any trends that have told you in which direction we are going?
So I do think that we're already almost in like the middle point where people are taking gut health more seriously, simply because it's become a non-negotiable now, right? Like people who want to say lose weight, or people who want better digestion, or people who are suffering from chronic illnesses like irritable bowel syndrome or so on and so forth. They're already talking about gut, and they're already understanding that diet and gut health, like they're so interconnected. It's not either or. You don't have to completely restrict yourself beyond what is necessary.
True.
But at the same time, you need to think of diet from a gut perspective so that it works against you and not so that it doesn't work against you but for you, right?
Right.
The problem that I think right now, and this is a trend, which is fear mongering.
Oh, yeah.
I think with social media platforms, I think people are genuinely just very confused. Is is gluten good? Is gluten bad? Is bread good? Bread bad? Will protein cause kidney stones? How much protein should I take? If I'm not working out, should I take protein? Seed cycling. There is just so much information from folks who aren't certified to be giving this information, but they will make it in a very like snappy way. Their hooks are going to be great. The headline is going to sound so exciting, right? So they will want to listen to the video and they will forward it to like their WhatsApp communities. And WhatsApp news in general should be banned.
No, the WhatsApp university is a different university that people should definitely not enroll in. But no, it's very true, because I think the fear mongering gets people to taking extreme steps. The fear of, I'm not getting enough protein, you won't believe it gets to the point of a 6-month-old. When people start off, they're like, do you think my child is getting enough protein before they even turn 1? I'm like, calm down. Your gut can't deal with so much. Get started with the good, feed the good bacteria, get it prepared to all the protein it needs. So there's on one end where people have realized protein is important, but it's gotten another extreme where they think about it and only about it. And then you've gotten the other end where people have started saying no to carbs to a point where they don't eat anything with carbs. Then there are people who are overdoing the same kind of food, like, I'm sorry, but, eating 10 eggs a day, right? You know how much of a TMA cycle that's going to start creating in your gut, and people, completely discarding the yolks. That's another story altogether. But fear mongering is definitely where people are starting to screw up their health.
Yeah.
And that's giving them bigger problems. Take one problem at a time, solve the root cause of it, and then take it forward. Because otherwise, I mean, you're right. I mean, people are in that mid ground of, I understand gut is important, but the fear is making it go in a direction that needs a little
Absolutely.
rerouting.
And I think it directly ties into incomplete information. Like, and in this generation of chat GPT, where like everything you can get instantly, like you type it, there's no like thorough research done. So someone will come to me and be like, artificial sweeteners are terrible, like we can't have it at all. And I'm like, I agree, but what are you talking about? They'll be like, oh, it's this class of carcinogen, and I will tell them, your phone is also a carcinogen.
Right.
You're probably at a lesser risk of getting anything. And look at the ingredient list. Look at the quantity in which it's added. And no one's asking you to consume it every day.
Or in large quantities.
It is safe. Anything that's been distributed probably has like 20, 30 years of research done on it. It's been FDA certified, FSSAI certified. You don't need to jump the gun every single time and just like transmit information and scare people and disrupt their lives.
I think what's important is you take that information and you understand that, okay, this is an artificial sweetener. Yes, artificial sweetener has, there's research that's actually proven against it, that the research has updated itself in so many decades now. But at the same time, is everything that you're putting into your mouth having an artificial sweetener? Then you have a problem to deal with. But if it's one thing and it's in the ingredient list, the last ingredient, and you're doing very regulated portions of it, and you're aware of it, and you're eating other food that can eliminate it, then you really don't have a problem to deal with, right? It's, I think, also from a perspective of how much you're taking of these different things and how frequently, and wait, are you stopping to eat and are you only doing this?
Yeah.
I think that balance is very important. So, Simran, as someone who's deeply rooted in emotional and gut healing first, what made you believe that Truly and QUA were aligned? And was there anything that you felt in our science, in our values, or in our methodology that made you feel that this collaboration is going to be important?
Definitely. I think we both have we share the same foundation, which is science first and customer first.
Absolutely.
Also, right? And I think this is how the generation is also going to shape. I think QUA does a lot of hands-on, in-person training with their clients to not just tell them, oh, eat better, but like establish systems and establish very personalized ways in which people can optimize their health. There is no one size fits all approach here either,
Right.
where you look at a person in its individuality, you look at what will work for them, which will look very different from what has worked for a different client. And you're approaching this from a very science first perspective. You all don't jump the gun when it's like, okay, take supplement A, B, C, D. You'll try to break down a person's individual case, see what might work best for them. And as a person also, I believe in a very food first approach. Something that does get solved with food, that is going to be my first way forward as well. And even though I'm a founder of a supplement brand, I will tell my folks that, or my users, that even if you're taking all the supplements but your food is not fixed, you're not going to derive benefits out of that.
Absolutely.
So while QUA is doing this hands-on experience with folks clinically, I think what we are doing is we have very science-aligned products that can help push people in the right direction and bridge the gap that food cannot get to.
Right.
Because foods anyway are like, the nutrient is getting degraded. We need better immunity. We need better gut health. And if there are products and specific strains of microorganisms that is getting depleted and that cannot be bridged by food, and we need sustainable solutions to keep it going without side effects, with a lot of R&D gone into the Indian lifestyle and the modern lifestyle, that is where truly comes in. So I think that it's a package where you have clinical hands-on experience and you have science-backed products, both fueling something way more sustainable than all of these false promises that people come up with, like short-term solutions that might look good to you because they're all shiny and rose-colored, but in the long run, you will need something that works for your body. You will need systems, and you will need well-aligned, well-researched products to help you get there.
And I think I should say that, when you reached out to me and you were telling me about things, that's what I figured will work, because food works. But if this little plug can come in and light you up better, you need that plug, right? And if that plug is made for the Indian population, researched for what our food looks like, I think it's an essential plug. I think that's where I would put it.
Absolutely.
Great. It was lovely having you.
So Suhasini, one very common question that I get from people is, I am not working out. Do I need protein? And how would you, I'm sure your clients come to you with this as well. How do you tackle this?
It's very simple. You've got to first analyze what their daily intake looks like. So the way I would do it very quickly would be, I would analyze what their daily intake looks like, what their output that the exercise looks like, but are they getting the bare minimum of a 0.8 to 1 gram of their kg body weight, right? Because you need that for your functioning, basic functioning, your immunity, your hormones, everything is dependent, because remember, protein is a building block,
Absolutely.
right? So the way I would deal with it, do I need a protein supplement or can I handle it with my food, will be to first analyze your food, will be to first analyze how you're able to digest all that food, and then bridge that gap with a protein supplement if I need to. And if I don't need to, I don't.
Fair enough.
Yes. I have one question for you, Simran. As a South Asian, as is an Indian traditional diet, we use curd, we use pickles. Now, the most common question everybody asks me is, do I really need a probiotic supplement? Does it really work? I mean, I eat a cup of curd every day. I include pickles, and there are so many traditional ways in which I can get these probiotics. So do I really need that capsule? What would you have to say?
So as a nutritional profile, all of these fermented foods, whether this is curds or pickle or kefir and all of that, great nutritional profile. From a probiotic perspective, there is no randomized controlled trial done to show you how many strains of probiotics, in what concentration are you actually getting after it has passed your metabolism through your stomach. Because again, these strains, they are not protected. They are not very heat stable or bile stable all the time. So they will get killed by your stomach acid. So while a curd is great from a nutritional perspective, if you're looking for probiotics to solve a specific gut issue, you're way better off depending on a concern-specific probiotic to ensure that your needs for that particular concern are met. Simply because fermented foods aren't probiotics.
Right.
Probiotics are good bacteria that actually give the host the benefits that the host is looking for, but how much of that we're getting from curd and how much of it is actually reaching the colon, people have not been able to find out. There aren't robust peer-reviewed studies done here.
So in the similar way that I would probably say with protein, you would say add the curd, add the pickle, add the kefir, add the ambali. But if you have a specific problem, then get to the specific probiotic.
Absolutely. If you're suffering from, say, acid reflux or indigestion, just eating bowls and bowls of curd is not going to help
Solve
you,
your problem.
right? So you need a specific gut bacteria that has proven and been clinically validated to help you solve for that, and it's completely natural for you to include it, right? So you would want to take a targeted approach rather than, just consuming curd and not realizing whether it's working for you or against you.
Fair enough. Thank you. What is the biggest dietary shock that NRIs experience when they move abroad?
I think most NRIs are bloated because their guts are inflamed because of a change in diets. So we're moving from, say, hot home cooked food to more like cold processed food. That causes a lot of inflammation in your gut.
Got it. Emotional hunger, in one sentence, what causes it?
Emotional hunger causes hormonal disbalance, causes appetite disbalance, causes weight gain.
One habit that destroys the metabolism and everybody's ignoring it.
Snacking. I think it's very easy to convince yourself that it's just a snack. I'm having a craving, let me just give in. But it accumulates and it really impedes your weight loss journey.
Can stress cancel out the benefits of probiotic? Yes or no?
No, it can prolong the duration required to see the results explicitly, but it doesn't cancel the efficacy of the probiotic.
So the first gut-brain axis, according to you, that gets disrupted when there's chronic stress.
There are many, but predominantly appetite.
So to everyone listening, remember, your gut is not just a system. It's actually a conversation your body is constantly trying to have with you. So the more you understand it, the better we can fuel ourselves for life, for performance, and for long-term health. If you found today's discussion valuable, make sure to subscribe and share this episode with someone who really needs it. And stay tuned for more expert-led conversations right here on the QUA Nutrition podcast. Simran, thank you for being here today. Your insights on gut health, on probiotics, and on just everyday wellness, it was not just insightful, but also very empowering.
It was a pleasure for me to be here. Thank you so much, Suhasini, for having me.
Thank you.